Hello guys, welcome back to my channel, Knowledge Central, where we try to, gain insights on different aspects of our life, especially with self-improvement and things regarding my career and how did I, you know, cross different barriers of my life from bachelor's, master's, and then my work life in Netherlands a little bit. But in this series, I especially focus on Psychology 101, where I try to learn the basics of psychology through an online course. It's a small diploma and, of course, a little bit of TED Talks and also podcasts and some Spotify playlists as well on psychology and small tips and tricks. So I try to juice it down in few videos. And yeah, in the last video, you would have probably seen an amazing, very basic, simple topic on classical conditioning and how we, can condition our response or how certain aspects of an organism, human beings, for example, are conditioned in doing certain things. So, yeah, I think let's dive into this video where I'll be talking about second kind of conditioning, which is operant conditioning. So, if you remember, conditioning can be broadly classified into two parts. One is classical conditioning, and second is what we're going to see in this video. So let's dive in. So first and foremost, it's really important to understand the definition of operant conditioning. What exactly is an operant conditioning? And as the name suggests, it's basically a learning where a consequence is dependent on a response. Like, for example, I do something and the organism responds for that particular operant, right? I basically give it food when it presses a lever. And for example, I give it some thing, or basically I take away something. So there is basically something done based on the consequence of its own action. That's it. And it's really important to understand the definition because it's all clearly explained. And that's why I put the full definition in the video, where basically, again, learning from the consequence and consequence dependent on the organism's action. So do something only if organism responds in a certain way, right? And the consequence then influences the likelihood of it happening again and again and again, and or probably stopping a particular, right, influence. So basically, Skinner did experiment on mouses where he kind of gave it food when it actually presses a lever. And when it accidentally presses for the first time, it got food. And then it kind of associates things, and then it presses again and it gets food. And then it creates this association. That's when it kind of gets conditioned to press the lever when it's hungry, for example. So that's an overall definition of operant conditioning. And classical conditioning is a little different, as we saw in the previous video. So if you guys have not seen it, please go to the previous video where I talk in depth on what is classical conditioning and different terms and important things to keep in mind. So jumping to the next important aspects, and it's really important also to know the key terms involving operant conditioning. And so that, when we dive deeper into examples or when we go into different studies, it'll be easier for us to navigate. And that's the whole point of this series, where I try to make everyone familiarized with basic terms and key aspects of different concepts of conditioning. So if we read a scientific paper, if we read a PhD thesis, for example, you'll be able to grasp what's the research on and what are the conclusions and things like that. So starting with operant response. So basically that's the response, or we can also say it's a behavior of the organism that is voluntary and it's not associated with particular stimulus, right? Here we are not setting a stimulus as we discussed in Pavlov's experiment in the previous video. So this response acts as a means, or basically it modifies the environment, right? An example is basically a person picking up a book to read, right? It's a very simple example. It's an operant response. It's the action, or what is, the organism, human being, or the organism does. And next comes the reinforcer, where basically reinforce the person or someone who gives the reward. Like if you do something, I'm going to offer you chocolate, right? The reward given for a response in order to strengthen it, increase the likelihood of happening it again, is basically what's the job, or what exactly reinforcer means. So when you do something, I'm going to give this. When you do it again, I'm going to give another chocolate, and that strengthens the likelihood of it happening again. And then comes two important aspects. The reinforcer can actually be increasing the likelihood of an action, at the same time also decreasing the likelihood of the action happening. And that's where, because of this definition, it's divided into two terms. One is a positive reinforcer, second is a negative reinforcer. And I think in general, we would have probably heard different aspects or different terms like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. And one of the sole purpose of the competition at the end, we actually give a reward. It's considered as, positive reinforcement, where people again participate and try to win, get a prize. Next year, they come again, participate, try to get the prize. So it's a very simple example of positive reinforcement, where a reward which strengthens the response as usual. So imagine when the mouse in the Skinner's experiment, when it presses the lever, we give it a food and it kind of gets happy about it. And of course, when it gets hungry again, it kind of maybe tries to press the lever and gets the food again. So that's kind of, reinforcing in a positive way to actually do a particular action. So it's kind of a positive reinforcer or positive reinforcement. And the exact opposite is a negative reinforcer or negative reinforcement, right? So a reward which strengthens the response by removing the unpleasant stimulus, just taking away house or homework, right? So basically, this is something, again, this is different from punishment. It's really important to understand, where punishment is something like intentionally, for example, giving it a shock when it does something is a punishment, and that's different from negative reinforcer. It's basically negative reinforcer is still a reward, and this is a really important aspect to understand, and that's why I'm trying to strengthen the key terms first before diving a little bit deeper into the concepts and research and findings. So negative reinforcer is also a reward, which strengthens the response, but by reducing the unpleasant stimulus, right? By taking away homework. Like for example, when you behave properly, I'm gonna probably give you less homework, right? And things like that. So this is the key term to understand and be aligned with. So to wrap it up, especially this video and the key terms in a picture, I think this is very well explained, where you want to have a certain behavior response and it has a consequence. Of course, when you do something, there's going to be a result, there's going to be a consequence, and it's done in two ways, or it's reinforced in two ways. Positive reinforcer, where basically a behavior is strengthened, and then punishment is basically the behavior is decreased, right? For example, in terms of shock, and that's a clear definition of punishment. So you do something, and then you get a shock, and you get basically not something which you be happy about. So these are probably the key terms to understand, especially with operant conditioning, where stimulus and consequence. And I think it's quite important to understand the definition and then try to grasp this before getting on to the next video. And I think I'll pretty much wrap up this video with just these four terms, and especially on operant conditioning. So on a whole, again, conditioning is basically making the organism, human beings, mouse, rat, doesn't matter, basically associate something in order to do something. And that's divided into two big chunks. One is classical conditioning, and second one is operant conditioning. And I feel I gave a very basic idea of the different key terms involved in operant conditioning. So with this, I think I'll wrap up this video, and I think stay tuned for more basic videos in Psychology 101. And actually, I'm really excited because in the next series, we're going to learn more about memory, sleep, and illusion and things like that. So it's really important to understand all these basics, and then when you have a really nice idea, you will slowly understand why people behave the way they do, and then why we do certain actions, why we remember certain things, and what to be aware of, especially in terms of perception and illusion and things like that. So stay tuned, And as usual, I'm ending with a quote where it's really important to, think and breathe certain things which we really like, and they become what we repeatedly do. So take care and have an amazing day or an amazing night. Looking forward to the next videos. Until then, bye bye.